his shortest ever devotional. Are we timing you, Rupert, or are we?
You can time me in a minute. Oh, Paul has got a timer on, I can see. But you can't press start just yet, because we're going to read the scripture first. So we're going to read a parable, which is not one of your really well-known parables. And it's quite, in some respects, it's quite a hard parable, potentially. And so that's where I just want to help us think about this parable in a particular way, and then give some space for us just to reflect and listen to the text. So, Hannah, can you just read this parable out?
Yeah. So this is from the New Living Translation, and it is Luke 13, verses 6 to 9. And it says, "Then Jesus told this story. A man planted a fig tree in his garden and came again and again to see if there was any fruit on it. But he was always disappointed. Finally, he said to his gardener, 'I've waited 3 years and there hasn't been a single fig. Cut it down. It's just taking up space in the garden.' The gardener answered, 'Sir, give it one more chance. Leave it another year, and I'll give it special attention and plenty of fertilizer. If we get figs next year, fine. If not, then you can cut it down.'"
Okay, nice cheery parable for the beginning of the year. And so I just want to share one really brief thought about how we might read this scripture. And the joy of parables is that in one sense there's lots of different ways in which we can read them. And the idea of a parable is a story that invites us into that story, that speaks to us and shows us something about ourselves or about life in some way. And I think it's really hard not to read scriptures and actually to read circumstances that happen in our lives in some kind of meritorious way. In other words, you get what you deserve. And I think it's really hard not to read scriptures and read our lives in that way. So when there's something is going wrong with our lives, I think so often it's easy for us to think, I must have done something wrong and God is not blessing me. And when things are going well in our lives, we think, well, maybe I've done something right and God is blessing me. It's that kind of we get what we deserve. And interestingly, just before this parable, Jesus seems to be hitting and saying, challenging that worldview that you get what you deserve. So he talks about two instances. One is where a bunch of people are killed by political leader Herod. And then another one where a tower falls down and a bunch of people are killed there. And he's saying, in both situations, do you think that these people died because they were the worst sinners? In other words, they got what they deserved. No, not at all, says Jesus. And then he tells this parable. Now, the way that this parable is most often read, and I'm offering something here that is pretty unusual. So just full disclosure, caveat. You might want to completely throw this out. There are people that read it this way, but mostly this parable is read that God is the owner of the fig tree, and he's disappointed with the fruitfulness of the fig tree, and he wants to cut it down. And we then become the figure that has to work hard to get fruitfulness so that we get God's blessing. So the question I want to ask, here's my thought for the day. What happens if we see that God or Jesus is the gardener, not the owner of the fig tree? How does that change our reading of this parable if Jesus or God is the one that's saying, no, let's not cut it down, let's not be too hasty. let me give it special attention and plenty of fertilizer and see what happens. And maybe I'm the one that is the owner of the fig tree that's standing in judgment upon my own life or the things that I'm doing. That maybe I'm the one that's disappointed, and Jesus is coming to me as the gardener and saying, no, 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 no. That's not the way it is at all. Let me tend this fig tree to see whether it can be fruitful. Okay, does that make sense? So, it's just flipping round the way that we would often read this scripture, a different way. And so now I just want to give us some space to reflect on that. And this is a kind of mashup of an imaginative contemplation and a lectio divina. So you can do whatever you like, basically. We're let's give about 10 or 12 minutes. We'll read this scripture. I think we'll read it 3 times and have some silence in between, and Hannah and I will just share the reading. And you might like to imagine yourself as a fig tree. You might like to imagine your workplace or your family or relationships or things that maybe are going on in your lives. You might like to imagine CCE as the fig tree and then Jesus as the gardener coming. So one way you could just engage with this for the next 10 minutes or so would be to enter into an imaginative contemplation of this scripture. Or you could just listen to the words and allow the words to just strike you. What is it which words strike you in the first reading, and just stay with those words and just allow those words to do something within our hearts. And my hope, my expectation is that as we do this, that we might have a sense of the Spirit speaking to us or inviting us into something or revealing or showing us something. Okay? Excellent. Thank you for that yes. So, can I just invite us to find a comfortable posture? I personally find it helpful to put 2 feet on the ground and to feel myself really rooted in a chair, to sink into a chair and feel that I am being held by the chair, but in a greater sense, held by this eternal God who holds me. And just allow the gift of these words, this scripture, this story to come to us in this moment. You might just want to, as we started this morning, hold your hands out in a posture of receptivity just in your lap. I'm open, God, to what you might wish to give to me. Speak to me in this moment. Then Jesus told this story. A man planted a fig tree in his garden and came again and again to see if there was any fruit on it, but he was always disappointed. Finally, he said to his gardener, I've waited 3 years and there hasn't been a single fig. Cut it down. It's just taking up space in the garden. The gardener answered, Sir, give it one more chance. Leave it another year, and I'll give it special attention and plenty of fertilizer. If we get figs next year, fine. If not, then you can cut it down.
And Jesus told this story. A man planted a fig tree in his garden and came again and again to see if there was any fruit on it. But he was always disappointed. Finally, he said to his gardener, "I've waited 3 years and there hasn't been a single fig. Cut it down. It's just taking up space in the garden." The gardener answered, "Sir, give it one more chance. Leave it another year and I'll give it special attention and plenty of fertilizer. If we get figs next year, fine. If not, then you can cut it down."